In this video, we're going to see how we can make forecasts when the time series shows seasonality pattern without trend. So we're going to use data file umbrella as an example. So here I have the quarterly sales of umbrella for the past 5 years. And I want to make forecast for the 6 years. So let's say for four quarters of the next year, we want to make forecast, right? So that's what we want to do. We want to use the time series that is available for the past 5 years, and then use that, make a forecast for the next 4 quarters. So that's the objective here. Whenever we have a seasonal pattern without trend, so we already know how we can identify that pattern. We just need to look at the line chart. If we just take a look at the line chart, we see that like this is pretty obvious. Like this is a stylized example. So we have for each year, we have the sales for 4 quarters, right? So, and then when we look at the sales, the pattern that we see, the movement of the sales in each year and compare it to the next year, to the next year, to the next year, we always see the same pattern repeating, right? So that's kind of obvious that we have seasonal, and then I said seasonal without trend. And I know that because if you add trend line, you see that the trend line is pretty horizontal. It's pretty flat, right? I mean, you can add the equation on chart and you will see that the slope is very close to 0. The slope here is pretty close to 0, and that's how we know that the data set, the time series, does not show a trend, does not contain a trend pattern. So that's our assumption here, that we have seasonality without trend, and we want to use that. So I'm just gonna move it from here. So when you want to perform seasonality, here we want to use regression for seasonality. There are multiple ways that you can do seasonal forecast, but always, regardless of the technique that you use for seasonal forecast, the first thing that you need to determine is that you need to define the season as basically the portion of the time that you will consider as your season, or as a independent portion of the time that you want to actually identify as a season. So here again, since this is a stylized example and we have quarterly, says our seasons cannot be less than a quarter. And indeed, I'm just gonna go ahead and take each quarter as one season. So I will have 4 of them. If I had the monthly sales, it was probably better to take season as month. So that in that case, I will have 12 seasons. If I had daily sales, the season probably could be a week, like the day of the week, or week of the month, or I mean, so you can go upward. If you have daily sales, you can take month or week as your season, but you can't go down. For example, if you have quarterly sales, your season cannot be week, cannot be day, cannot be hours, cannot be shift. It can be half a year. It can be a year, actually. So you can go upward, but you can't go downward when you have the, when you're looking at your basically the data set. So season here, we go with the simplest one, the quarter. And when you have 4 quarters, so now the number of the quarter is, I mean, here we have the numbers, but these are actually labels. There is no, like this season 2 doesn't have twice as value as season 1. So this 2 is not 2 times bigger than 1. It's just a label for this one. Indeed, the season here, the season that we're defining, this is a categorical variable. And from regression analysis, from the linear regression analysis, we know that when we're dealing with categorical variables, when our categorical variable has, let's say, n level, we need n minus 1 dummy variables in order to appropriately define it, appropriately characterize it, right? So now we have 4 quarters. How many dummy variables do we need? 4 minus 1. So 4 minus 1, 3 dummy variables are needed in order to model the seasons. And what are these? I have 4 quarters. I'm gonna take the first one, the second one, and third one, and I'm gonna leave the last one as one where all the other 3 are gonna take 0. So I'm gonna call them quarter 1, QTR1, QTR2, and QTR3. And then we need to run a regression using the variable of interest as our dependent variable and all these dummy variables as the independent variables. And if you do that, you're gonna get an equation like this: y hat estimates of sales, estimated sales equals B0 y-intercept plus B1 times quarter 1, the dummy variable, the first dummy variable, B2, the second dummy variable, plus B3, the third dummy variable. And this can go on and on depending on the number of dummy variables that you have. Once you have this equation, you can use that for making prediction. For, let's say, for the next year, you just plug basically the value of the dummy variable, and it's going to give you the estimated value, the predicted value for sales in the next year, right? So let's go ahead and start it. So I have the quarter numbers. If you don't have, you have to create this first. And then we need to create the dummy variables. So quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, this is how we name them, right? 3 dummy variables. And I'm gonna highlight, and I'm gonna insert one row here. I just wanna show you the formula that I'm gonna use here. So quarter 1, I set 3 dummy variables. Quarter 1 is gonna be, let's say quarter 1, for example, I'm not gonna write down all of them. Quarter 1 is gonna be 1 if quarter is equal to 1 and 0 otherwise. So that's how we want the dummy variable to be defined. This is what we know from regression analysis when we have categorical variables, right? So you define dummy variable is a variable that takes 1 or 0, 1 if the categorical variable is equal to a certain value, and 0 otherwise. So we just were first looking at quarters that are equal to 1. So I'm gonna write an if statement. So if quarter number is equal to 1, put 1, otherwise put 0. All right, so as you can see, if statement, the logical test, value if it's true. So if B3 is 1, it's gonna put here in this cell 1. Otherwise, it's gonna put 0. And I can drag it down. It's gonna take care of. So whenever the quarter number is 1, it's gonna put 1. And whenever it's something other than 1, it puts 0. And then I just do the same thing for if quarter number at period 1 at the same period is equal to 2, put 1, otherwise put 0. If quarter number is equal to 3, put 1, otherwise put 0. And I can drag it down. So very simple. This is how you can define it. If you don't want to use the if statement, you can simply type ones and zeros, but just be careful to and make sure that you're putting the ones at the right place. So quarter 3, whenever you see 3 and actually in quarter column, you need to have 1 in quarter 3 dummy variable column. So you see, and then whenever all of these 3 are equal to 0, that means it's not quarter 1, it's not quarter 2, it's not quarter 3. So it has to be quarter 4. That's why we don't define another one for quarter 4, and 3 is enough, all right? And so our dummy variables are defined now. Now we need to perform, we need to find this. We need to find this equation. For this, we need to run, it's going to be a multiple regression. We need to call data analysis, regression. And so Y range is going to be sales. X range is going to be the dummy variables, quarter 1, quarter 2, and quarter 3. I have labels. I'm just going to put the output at the end here at A29. Technically speaking, this model should still follow the, should still have the necessary conditions for residual, but we're not going to worry about it here. But in reality, in practice, you should actually check those. You should make sure that the coefficient for variables are significant. Otherwise, you shouldn't technically have them in your equation. But I'm not going to check it for now. I'm not going to worry about the other stuff. I'm just looking for the equation here. So, okay. The equation is as follows. I can write down the equation, but let me just take this, Control C, copy this. I just need the coefficients, all right? I just need the equation. Control C and Control V here. So this is my basically forecasting model. I now have B0, B1, B2, and B3, and the value of quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3 is the dummy variables. The value for them is actually provided here. We already generated these dummy variables. All right, I just need to use these coefficients in order to make seasonal forecasts. Okay, so it's going to be B0, and I need to fix B0. I need to lock it by adding the $sign, by pressing F4 plus B1, again, F4 times Q1. I'm doing the forecast now for Q1 of year one. So the value of Q1, the dummy variable QTR1 plus coefficient for Q2 fixed times the value of QTR2 plus the coefficient for Q3 F4 times the value of QTR3. And that would give me the forecast for the first quarter. And if I just drag it down, just making sure that I have the correct formula, the formula is as follows. I just drag it down, and that would give me the forecast for the 6th year. One thing that is worth to note here is we have, as you can see here, the numbers are exactly the same from a year to another year. And indeed, this 124 is the average of the sales in quarter. Whenever you see Q1, if you take those numbers and take the average, it's going to give you 124. We could have done that actually instead of doing all these, lengthy process. But this is going to be helpful, especially when we have, when we want to add trend. That way, it's going to be a very complete, very advanced model.